Welcome back and welcome to another book discussion. I knew that I wanted to talk about these particular books as soon as I read them, and I have talked about them to some extent on this channel, but then I saw a video about these books on Jean at Bookish Thoughts channel. I will leave her video link down below. I'll try and leave it up here as well so that you can click on that and see exactly what I'm talking about. And so I want to talk about Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls and Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls 2. I'm going to be discussing both books today. And she made a video about the original book, book 1, and went into quite an in-depth discussion about some of the issues that she has with the book. And so I kind of wanted to address some of the things that she brings up, and also tell you some of my thoughts on the book as well. So it says, this is Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. You'll have seen this book absolutely everywhere, and I have talked about 2 a little bit on this channel as well, and this was the very first book that I read this year. So Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls reinvents fairy tales, inspiring children with the stories of 100 heroic women from Elizabeth I to Serena Williams, illustrated by 60 female artists from every corner of the globe. This is the most funded original book in the history of crowdfunding. So yeah, this book was put together through crowdfunding, and as it points out, the draw of this one in particular is the gorgeous illustrations that it has inside. And these stories inside the book are in the form of fairy tales. So to use one of my favourites as an example, once upon a time there was a king who wanted to leave his kingdom to a son. When his wife gave birth to a daughter, King Henry VIII was so mad that he left her, sent the child away, and married another woman. He believed that only a man would be able to rule the country. After he died, he was delighted when his new wife gave birth to a boy, Edward. Henry's daughter Elizabeth grew up a bright and brilliant girl with striking red hair and a fiery temper. Edward was only 9 when his father died and became king. A few years later, he also became ill and died, and his sister Mary became queen. Mary thought that Elizabeth was plotting against her, and so she locked Elizabeth up in the Tower of London. One day, the Tower guards burst into her cell. "The Queen is dead," they announced, and they fell to their knees in front of her. Elizabeth instantly went from being a prisoner in the Tower to the country's new queen. Elizabeth's court was home to musicians, poets, painters, and playwrights. The most famous was William Shakespeare, whose plays Elizabeth adored. She wore sumptuous gowns decorated with pearls and lace. She never married. She valued her own independence as highly as that of her own country. Her people loved her dearly, and when she died, Londoners took to the streets to mourn the greatest queen they had ever had. And then there's a quote. All of these feature a quote as well, and Elizabeth's quote is, "A clear and innocent conscience fears nothing." And then it also gives you the dates that they were born, and if they've died, the dates they died, and their location at the bottom. And one of the things that I really like about this book is that it has women from all over the world. A lot of these we've had a lot of very similar books come out recently, especially in light of the Women's March and in light of the success of this one. And they can sometimes be a little Western world heavy, but these books don't just have US women, they don't just have UK women, they have women from all over the world in here. Aside from the format and the illustrations, I also like the fact that there is a diverse range of women in these books. If I give you an example here, on this page here, this is the second book, we have Paralympic fencer Beatrice Vio, who is from Italy, and this one tells her story, and so this is very much coming from a different country and a person who is not able-bodied, which I think is fantastic to include, and she is not the only one in here. And then if we turn to the next page, just to give you a range of the diversity, we have Beatrix Potter. And I love the illustration of Beatrix Potter. This has to be one of my favourites in this book. And her quote says, "There's something delicious about writing the first words of a story. You never quite know where they'll take you." And of course we have Peter Rabbit sitting with her as well. And yeah, I like the fact that there is a diverse range of women in these books. One of the things that Jean brought up in her discussion was the inclusion of Margaret Thatcher in the book. So firstly, I really love the drawing of Margaret Thatcher in this one. I think it's a really interesting picture, and I like the fact that she's actually smiling a little bit in this picture as well, because so many pictures of Margaret Thatcher, we don't see her smiling. And her quote says, "You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it." So this is to do with her time as UK Prime Minister, and one of the things that Jean said that she questioned her inclusion and others' inclusion in the book because she felt that during her time as Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher had done a lot more harm than good, and so she wasn't sure why she had been included in the book. Now, my thoughts on this, I don't dispute the fact that a lot of the policies that Margaret Thatcher had and a lot of the movements she takes, particularly the bill that she put across in Parliament so that homosexuality couldn't be taught and discussed in schools. Thankfully, for the time that I've been teaching in schools, that has been repealed, so that's okay. But yeah, obviously I disagree with that, and some of the things that she did to do with the poll tax and the miners in the country. Obviously, there are some things which the UK government is still trying to kind of put right or deal with today that Margaret Thatcher did. However, I agree with her inclusion in the book because I think that the book is promoting strong women who have fought for themselves to gain in life, to become powerful women. And Margaret Thatcher was a grocer's daughter who went into Parliament that was full of men, and she was one of the only women in Parliament. She became a member of Parliament. She, ran for Prime Minister, and, she got knockback after knockback after knockback. And her story is such that despite those knockbacks and despite being a time when women weren't in political power and women weren't respected in that way, and it was very much still a women's places in the home, she rose to power and became Prime Minister because of the hard work that she did. And she came from quite a poor background as well to then become a sort of a powerful woman who had money in her own right as well. And she still had children and still worked and was Prime Minister. And so I think that her sort of image as a rebel girl, somebody who has fought and who has kind of used her own power to become her own person, I think is relevant and is valued for a position in the book. So I can completely see what Jean's saying, that she was an unpopular person, and in both of these books there are people in them who have made questionable choices and who have made choices that affect the running of the country. A lot of people at the time of Elizabeth I thought that some of the choices that she made were questionable, but again, she was doing something that had traditionally been the role of a man, and she was doing it well. And she, both of those women that I've just talked about had people questioning their choices and stuck to their guns and made choices for themselves. They earned reputations as these strong, confident women because they allowed their own choices to come through despite opposition to them. Another thing that Jean brings up, which I do agree with, and if perhaps a third book is in production at the moment, this would be something that could be included in a third book, is that these books very much focus on individuals, and there are some amazing groups of women out there. So for example, we have Emmeline Pankhurst in one of the books, I think it was the first one, whereas we don't kind of mention the suffragettes as a whole. We have in the second book a couple of small groups of women mentioned. So for example, in the second one, we have the women who were highlighted in the book and the film Hidden Figures, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson, and I really like their illustration as well. Let's face it, I love all of the illustrations in these books and they are amazing. So every day, Catherine, Dorothy and Mary drove to NASA, the agency responsible for the American space program. They were all brilliant scientists and their job was to crack complex maths problems to make sure that astronauts could travel safely to space. So we have them included, and we also have freedom fighters, a group of freedom fighters included in here as well. So there are more groups included in the second book, but as Jean pointed out, and as I kind of felt as well, it would be great to see some more groups of women included in book 3, if book 3 is currently in production, because I think that we need to highlight the fact that women come together and do great things, as well as, you know, rebel girls doing their own thing and getting results because of it and being generally amazing people and setting an amazing example to women of the future. But we also have to highlight the fact that women can come together and create these powers as well. I just really loved these books. I read this one on International Women's Day, and this one was the first book that I read at the start of the year, and I think it kicked off my year just really nicely. I do agree that there's still a way to come, but then generally in, you know, the fight for female equality and, you know, specific groups of women as well, there's still a long way to go. And so for now, I think that these books are lovely and gorgeous, and the illustrations in them are just beautiful, just stunning illustrations. Was it Venus or the Williams sisters? Yeah, I really like their illustration. That's one of my favorites. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see I've shared some of them on there, and as I say, I love the Beatrix Potter one in this one and her inclusion. And the second book also comes with a map, a Rebel Girls map, that shows you where in the world the women being talked about are, and it kind of shows you as well that there's not a massive kind of Western bias in these books, and that's another of the things that I really love about them. And, you know, check out the end papers. I haven't written my name in there yet. Perhaps if I take them into school, I will. So yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on there, and kind of an answer to some of the things that Jean brought up on her channel. As I say, I've left links to her video so you can watch her thoughts as well. She gives quite an in-depth discussion, especially on the Margaret Thatcher particular inclusion. And yeah, as I say, I love them. I recommend them, and I will leave links to those below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. If you would like to contribute to this discussion, I would love to have a discussion with you in the comments below. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye.